And looks like we're live. Alrighty then. Well, first of all, before we start, happy Thanksgiving. I hope everyone is going to have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope everyone has been able to travel and all that good stuff. As usual, there's been a lot of crazy traffic out there. Hopefully, you have gotten to where you need to be or you are prepared to get to where you need to be. We're going to talk about a lot of the weather impacts impacting the northern mid-Atlantic. A lot of interesting stuff going on. Aside from what is currently happening now, I'm sure you might have heard about some stratospheric warming that may be taking place and what that means for our weather pattern. I wouldn't jump the gun just yet, but we'll talk about all of that in a minute. But first, of course, I just want to say how thankful I am that you're here, that we have subscribers for NY and JPA Weather, that I've been able to do all this. It's something that is a dream come true. So I'm very thankful for all of you here, and I really appreciate it. So again, thank you. And of course, I want to take the time to thank my wife, who deals with my insanity running around with the weather and has done an amazing job, by the way, decorating this entire house. We're getting ready to decorate the office. It's crazy. We have lights everywhere. We have garlands. It's going to be great, So, she does an amazing job as always. So it wouldn't be the live chat without her. So even though she's in the background, she does a lot. So as always, thank you, honey, for being the rock behind everything I do. I wouldn't be able to do most of the stuff I do without you. So
I love you too, honey.
I love you very much. All right, so now with that, let's talk about what's going on here. Of course, as always, we'll get to all the questions in the live chat. I can see already the premium side's already starting to fire up. And of course, after that, we'll also take care of the YouTube as well, get to that and talk about all that stuff. So let's see here. First, I got to change over to the data. So what I did is that I set up the data to have a nice little talking point, and then I'll take your questions. And what I want to cover first is the weather through the holiday weekend, and then we'll get to the long range stuff, because what I want to do is go over everything that we've been talking about with this upcoming winter and what we've been looking for and what we actually have. So first of all, our cold front has cleared the coast. We have cold air transport starting to take hold. It's still relatively mild out there right now with temperatures in the 40s and 50s. We have cold air transport. You can see the northwesterly winds are in place here. You can see on our surface map from WeatherTap, nice cold front setup here moving through. Let's refresh this real fast. And you can see not much precipitation left over. We have some residual lake effect influence here, but this is pretty much all collapsing. And you can see at the mid-levels, we're getting that cold air transport. But it got delayed a little bit because of the evolution between our subtropical and polar short waves here. We finally now have a merger. And so with that, with this phasing occurring, we're already starting to get stronger cold air transport here in New England. And that's about to work its way into the northern mid-Atlantic. And when it does, it's still going to take about a day. I mean, tomorrow's going to be pretty much near normal with temperatures in the 30s and 40s in the morning and 40s and 50s in the afternoon. Nothing that's too unusual. It's Saturday where we're really going to get a nice cold shot from another polar shortwave. And when we take a look at our weather pattern overall, you can kind of see what's evolving here. The polar and subtropical jet streams here are still not in sync yet. And the reason why is there is a lot changing in the atmosphere right now. There's a lot of things that are starting to morph and change from the stratosphere to the tropical forcing and to what's going on with El Nino. So this makes a lot of sense where we have the subtropical jet stream sending short wave after short wave, tons of moisture, plenty of moisture to work with. And then you have the polar jet stream, which is very active, lots of short waves here and there. But as you can see here, you have this upper level lobe, kind of a lobe of the polar vortex here in the polar jet stream. but it's still a bit displaced. And because the polar vortex is so strong in the upper atmosphere, in the stratosphere, you're not getting that cold air really getting pressed down into the mid latitudes, which is something that we were expecting for much of November and December. Remember, the warmest month of this winter on the winter forecast was going to be December, and it still looks like it's going to be a reasonable forecast. So what does that mean with the water vapor satellite picture? Well, it means that while we have a lot of these short waves marching their way through, and give me 1 second, I apologize. I gotta get the tissue. I'll be right back. Oh, sorry, my nose has started running real fast.
Oh, there's tissues right there.
That's better. I don't know what happened. I was fine.
This time of year, honey. That's what happened.
I don't know. But I apologize. Anyway, where was I? Okay, yeah. Now, here is the water vapor satellite picture. And this really tells the whole tale of what's going on here. You have a lot of active short waves in the subtropical jet stream. You have a lot of short waves in the polar jet stream. They're not aligned, and you're not getting the type of blocking you would need to set up the alignment of these two jet streams. So you have this ridge is starting to pop here in the Atlantic, but what you typically need is an upper level low somewhere around here. It's kind of displaced. So as a result, you're not getting the timing you need, and you're not getting the ability of polar and Arctic air masses to build south. So with this type of pattern setup, you're going to get a lot of phantom storms showing up in the model guidance. But most of the time, they're not going to materialize into the actual storm that you're seeing 7 to 10 days out. Okay? So the reason why I mention that is that I already see a lot of people already posting storm threats and potential patterns 10 to 15 days out. And I think that is a mistake until we get a pattern locked in currently that would support that type of potential. So what the model guidance is doing right now is seeing all these changes going on in the atmosphere and seeing a lot of these factors starting to come together. And based on that, they're developing interesting 500 millibar patterns, which I'm sure would get you very excited. But you have to wait for it to materialize first to actually start to hone in on the details on what is potentially there. And that takes us to our weather pattern over the next couple of days. Now, the good news, from here on out through the weekend, you get this zonal pattern here between the polar and subtropical jet streams. So this is what's called a confluent pattern. So the air is coming into one place, and when the air comes in, it sinks. So it converges and sinks. It has this convergent, confluent pattern, and then it sinks to the ground, which enhances high pressure. Now, because this trough is building in, you get this push and kind of basically you get a glancing blow from this Arctic air mass that's going to be dropping through Ontario and Quebec and into northern New England. And so we get a chilly day on Saturday. So, by the way, if you're going to be putting out any decorations, Christmas, Hanukkah, what have you, I would do so on Friday and stay indoors on Saturday, because Saturday is going to be a rather chilly day. But regardless, it's going to be dry. It's going to be quiet. But I am concerned about one storm, one setup, and that is on Sunday night into Monday. We have in the European ensembles and GFS guidance, two short waves in the subtropical and polar jet stream that are going to be aligned just right to interact and possibly phase. And the European has been hinting at this, and it's starting to develop this 850 millibar load that has my attention here. And the reason why is because there's this slight negative tilt here. If we get the timing just right, that could allow for this polar air mass to get pulled towards the coast faster. And this storm could be a little bit stronger. I'm concerned about the fact that when this is happening, we have another storm out in the Atlantic that's already blown up. So you're going to have some slowing down of the subtropical and polar jet streams at this time. There might be enough time to get that interaction set up and bring more of a wintry mix into the Poconos, northwest New Jersey, the Hudson River Valley, and Connecticut than what's currently being shown. This is why, if you've been checking out the 7-day forecast or the public forecast, I've been mentioning rain, snow showers, wintry mixed showers over the interior. This is not really a threat for the coast, but could be a heavier rainfall threat than what is currently being shown in a lot of model guidance. This is the 12Z European look, which isn't too far off from the GFS Ensembles look. The GFS is a little bit further east, at least from the 12Z guidance. And this is pretty close to the European Ensemble guidance. So what I'm watching out for is this low pressure system intensifying and then this cold air getting pulled in a little bit faster than what's being shown here. So I'm going to be watching that through the weekend to see if we have that evolution actually take place. And, when I look at this, we have awfully tight gradient here. This is clearly influenced by the subtropical jet stream, this whole development. But if you could see, if we get a little bit slower evolution, a little bit faster evolution and interaction with the polar jet stream, you could see how this freezing line could easily drop down towards the Poconos, the Catskills, Hudson Highlands. Now, this portion of that air mass is not going to be reaching us for this storm. But then once that storm blows up, there's your strong cold air transport. And, with this, a lot of people are mentioning, hey, cold end to November, cold start to December. Yes, but no. Yes, we get a cold start, but a lot of that is because of the final days of November and the first day of December. Overall, though, this is not a pattern where you get the heart of this polar and Arctic air mass to drop south just yet. It kind of keeps on giving you this glancing blow, but not a full-on push. And the reason why is because of the nature of this 500 millibar pattern. Look at it. It's pretty much as zonal as you could possibly get. So all your true Arctic air is locked up here, and all your tropical air is locked up here, and we get this polar Pacific maritime mix that sets up from coast to coast. So your northern tier is colder, your southern tier is warmer, but no major storms or anything of that nature towards the start of December. Now I know, and we're going to touch on this in a few minutes, there's a lot of talk about, hey, this could be a KU pattern or Costa Mussolini storm pattern for the start of December. I'm going to explain why I'd be really, really cautious in saying something like that in public, especially as a meteorologist. So with that, we get an idea that this weekend, after that rain is gone, it's going to be pretty good. A little chilly in spots. Like I said, Saturday, you're talking about temperatures in the 30s and 40s for highs. So not the best day for outdoor activities, but Friday and Sunday look to be pretty nice with temperatures pretty much where you would expect for this time of year in the 40s and 50s. So if you have any plans or have anything you're doing for Thanksgiving, having family over, weather shouldn't be a problem. So that's certainly some good news. So let's talk about where we've been and where we're going with this winter pattern. A lot of interesting stuff has been evolving. First, let's talk about the tropical forcing, because I think this is a really important factor to this whole forecast. Because there's been a lot of debate. Is this an east base El Nino? Is this a west base El Nino? Is this a central base El Nino? Is it El Nino? Yes, we've had all those questions. The question about is it El Nino is because of the MEI, which Typically, you use that to measure the strength of El Nino because it combines atmospheric factors, sea surface temperatures, and it came in at 0.3. 0.3 is below El Nino levels, which was shocking considering the sea surface temperatures, which tells you there's this huge disconnect in the atmospheric forcing. So, I mean, that really caught everyone by surprise. And we get an update on that, I think, around December 5th or 7th, somewhere around there. So, of course, there's all that data. Then you have the sea surface temperatures. And, for a while, you had a very strong case of saying, hey, look, this is the East Base El Nino. Now, as we look at it, more basin-wide. And notice the two factors which are key to this forecast, which I think a lot of people are ignoring. It's not always, hey, where is it warmest? It's also, where is the gradient? Why is that important? Because the gradient drives your convection. It drives your winds. It drives your pressure. So if you start to understand the mechanisms behind the connection between the sea surface temperatures and the atmosphere, and you understand that, and you see that interaction in a 4D way, like kind of like 4D chess, right? When you look at that, then you kind of have a better idea of what's happening with this forcing and why it's so unique. Now, this, I think, is a factor of, yes, there's going to be some component of climate change aspect to this. And where that comes in is how warm this area is. Typically, when you have an El Nino, you got a pretty chilly area of water here. It's kind of displaced. And then you got a lot of cold water down here, which actually scientists really don't know what the heck's going on around here. So that's pretty interesting. So stay tuned on that. They're actually doing some studies on that. And then you have this cold pool here and this here. Well, this is our negative PDO. Very weak negative PDO. It's practically near neutral. And then you have this factor here. Why is this important? Because in 97, 98, 2015, 16, that was displaced further east. So this didn't exist in those events. And because of that, your convection was all focused here, which led to a displacement, and you have a more difficult time developing a lot of winter storms on the East Coast, especially 97, 98, where we had a very strong El Nino. That El Nino, should I mention, also had an MEI score that was through the roof, and an SOI setup score that was also through the roof. We don't have that this time. So we have a basin-wide El Nino. I think that's pretty clear. We have this gradient, which sets up the convection more towards the date line rather than around Hawaii. So you have your forcing that's different. And we've already seen that influence in how the weather pattern is evolving, as you can see with the subtropical jet stream. This short wave after short wave, just full of moisture. The subtropical jet stream is open for business and very much favorable for East Coast cyclogenesis. Now the question is, will the polar jet stream come into line? But in case you're questioning the idea of this El Nino, let's take a look at the actual data from the CPC. Let's put a nail into this idea that is purely east-based. For the first time since the development of this El Nino, we can now displace the warmest sea surface temperatures out of Nino 1+2 and towards Nino 3.3, there's 3, okay? We also are very, very close to reaching that same number at 3.4. If we notice the trends here, let me zoom out a little bit. Nino 1+2 is the only zone that's showing cooling. If that isn't a sign that we're seeing a shift, I don't know what is, but I will give you more data. Let's roll down. Well, it looks like we're seeing that shift there. A lot of warm water starting to shift towards Nino 4. You can see the overall average anomalies here. More of a basin-wide effect. You can see the departures. Let's see. Here we are. This is a change in the sea surface temperatures. You could see more cooling towards the eastern zone, more warming towards the western zones. So there's clearly a change there. You can see in terms of the upper ocean anomalies, we're not seeing any weakening. So El Nino is not weakening or anything of that nature. But this is the big one here. I've been bringing this up for weeks. The subsurface. For a long time, the warmest subsurface temperatures have been focused under Nino 1+2. We can see that shift now clearly. Now it's clearly not just 1+2. There is very deep warm pool of water in Nino 3.4. You could even make a case for the Nino 4, but more for 3 and 3.4. So it's clearly shifting towards central base. And also, very important, our convection is clearly continuing to focus around the dateline. Let's take a look at some more data. I'm going to be drilling in a lot of data here. And again, this is all can be found on the cpc.nsep.noaa.gov, all free. This is the vertical velocity. This is where we can study location of the strongest convection. The brown areas is where you have subsidence. So again, this is around, let's say, the Philippines. This is around, let's say, towards the coast of Mexico. And this is our dateline. And this setup has been in place. You can even go back to March. So, all right, let's say April. April now through June, July. So, okay, we got spring, we got summer, we have fall, and now we're heading into winter. It has not changed. And there's nothing to change it. So this is a very important sign. This is a theme in this El Nino, that our convection is focused around the dateline. And if you want more data to support that, well, there we go. And it's only getting stronger. So everything that we're looking at here all points to the influence of the strongest forcing around the dateline, which also happens to be an MJO phase 781, which I'll show you why that's important. Here is our SOI values. Typically, when you have a strong SOI, or strong El Nino, the SOI in the monthly and seasonal values tanks. That's why you usually have this chart around -25 and -30. That's typically where you would expect your strong El Nino signal from. Okay, in this level. As you can see, we're nowhere near that. This is more like a weak to moderate El Nino in terms of atmospheric forcing. So I know some of you guys, you've already seen this. I want to make sure that we go over this again, especially for some of you new guys out there. Again, thank you for all you guys new who have subscribed. I really appreciate it. And of course, thank you for all the people who've been here as well. A lot of thank yous because it is Thanksgiving. Now, this is our convection. Again, this is what we're going to be looking for. And you can see this constantly refiring. And the reason why it's important to study this convection here is because what it does is that it leads to lower heights here and starts to enhance the polar jet stream here. And you start to gain more support for an upper level low here rather than in the Gulf of Alaska. All these factors all come together. And that takes us back to our MJO. Now, there's been a lot of talk about a quote-unquote torch for December. I think that's a strong word. I wouldn't call it a torch, but I get the idea. And part of that idea comes in the forecast of the MJO clipping into phase 3 and 4. Now, okay, so what does this all mean? Well, the MJO has these phases, right? And it's basically the location of your convection. When your convection is around a dateline, well, it's basically in zones 8 and 1, and sometimes 2. When the convection shifts out of the dateline more towards, let's say, portions of the Philippines, then you start to see that shift towards 3 and 4. 3 and 4 is a warm phase for us during El Ninos. But that doesn't mean torch. It means pattern relaxation. Now, if the MJO is being forecast to be out into like a strong phase 3 and 4, then I'm like, yeah, torch. Bring out the flamethrower because it's taking out all North America. But we're not seeing that. What we're seeing instead is the MJO clipping 3 and 4 and then going back into a neutral state. And that's shown on the GFS guidance, CFS, you use Canadian, JMA, of course the European guidance, and even the Australian guidance. And notice every one of these models all bring the MJO back towards phase 8 and 1. What does this mean? Well, when the MJO goes neutral, the El Nino influence takes over very quickly, which happens to be around the middle of December. And then after that, towards the end of December, it goes into phase 8 and 1, which enhances the El Nino influence. So what I would say is that, okay, the tropical forcing wise, we see a weakening, a kind of break relaxation, and then re-intensification back into the original pattern that we have been seeing for over 6 months. So how does that impact our pattern for December? Well, it means that the start of December has a stormy potential, like the storm we're talking about possibly on Monday. Then we get a relaxation. And then the end of the month could be interesting. Of course, we have to talk about the stratosphere. We have an east base QBO. Now, why is this important? An east base QBO, when you have winds coming in that are negative, a negative QBO, same thing, right? It enhances the potential for major stratospheric warming. And so what have people been talking about? Models are picking up on it. After a lot of talk like, hey, look, the polar vortex could stretch. We have to see if there's warming. Every model is picking up major warming, clearly. And you're already starting to see small signs of that starting to show up at 10 millibars. So we're starting to see the observations. Now, why is warming important? The warming helps to weaken the polar vortex, disrupt the polar vortex. And when you weaken and disrupt the polar vortex, that increases the potential for your polar and Arctic air to come southward. And so there's been a lot of excitement about, let's see here, this guidance right here on the GFS. Oh, look at that warming. Yeah, look where it's located, Canada. Why is that important? Well, I'm going to tell you that in a second. On the European, basically showing the same thing. Pretty significant warming. So there's two parts of the story. First, the warming is great news if you're a winter weather lover. It's not the best news if you've been screaming for snow and a white Christmas. But it certainly is good news in the long run of this entire winter. I just want to step back here and remember what the winter forecast was. December was going to be a somewhat mild month, the warmest of the three. You'll see a step down and a shift towards the end of the month. And your best storm potential, as I was saying, was most likely going to be the very end of December, January, February. And the reason why I said that was that, okay, I'm going to need time for the polar vortex to get disrupted. There's going to have to be a major stratospheric warming event, and the whole pattern's going to have to take time to evolve. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that major stratospheric warming event. We're seeing the weakening of the polar vortex. We're seeing that. We're seeing this stretching. The concern here is that while we're also seeing it on the GFS, and while you should probably take the GFS beyond 10 days with a grain of salt, the one concern here is that with the warming taking place here, your polar vortex is more likely to be stretched in this orientation, which initially is a mild orientation for North America. But this whole process leads to a weakening of the polar vortex. And this right here is what really catches my eye. Over the past 4 days, we have seen a steady trend in model guidance, especially the European guidance, and now the GFS is moving in this direction, of a significant weakening and reversal of winds in the stratosphere. Now you might be saying, Stephen, why do I care about that? Well, when you have this signal, it strongly implies that after this first surge of major stratospheric warming, we get another one. And we get a reversal of the winds, which basically blows up the polar vortex. So it basically goes into different pieces. And this opens up the potential for strong high latitude blocking. So, strong high latitude blocking with cold air combined with a very active subtropical jet stream. Well, I think what you can see what the potential here, okay? So, again, this is all data that all points to exactly what the winter forecast was. And the reason why we want to go back and take a look at this is that when you have a forecast, you don't just put out the forecast and then sit back and that's it. What you do is that after you put out the forecast, then you start to look for the breadcrumbs to see if it's moving in that correct direction. The breadcrumbs are all falling exactly where I thought they were going to fall. Now, the next step is to watch exactly how this polar vortex evolves and how this major stratospheric warming takes shape. If we see it where the polar vortex sets up, let me pull up the GFS real fast, just to kind of show you what will likely scare the heck out of people at first. See how it does this? This feature right here initially would displace your polar and Arctic air masses off of North America, and you'd end up with a mild pattern over the United States in mid-December. Pretty much what I've been saying. The key here is that after this, the polar vortex gets beaten so much that it's easier to transport those polar and Arctic air masses from Siberia and the North Pole right into North America after this evolution. So at this point, what I'm seeing is pretty much everything that I've been thinking was going to evolve. And you can see here on the 46-day European ensembles that evolution here, mid-December, this right here is a very weak zonal pattern. You get this little blip here around the Rockies with this ridge, a very weak trough in the east, but overall your air masses are coming in from a Pacific polar modified region, not much of an upper level low, barely a trough here around the Aleutians. So a lot of storms are just going west to east in a very, very zonal pattern. You see below normal heights here around Iceland and Greenland. So clearly a positive NAO as well. Then as we head towards the latter part of the month, well, then things start getting a little bit more interesting here. Still not the best blocking in the Atlantic. Below normal heights more over the southeast. Above normal heights, a nice ridge on the west coast. Still not your upper level lows, so not optimal yet. As we move towards the end of the month, then things start getting interesting. And oh, by the way, this seems very similar to what the long-range monthly European forecast was suggesting. This was December's forecast of 500 millibars. And it rolls into January. So this looks like it's getting supported pretty well. It matched up very nicely to what we're seeing now with November. This is December, which is basically what we're starting to see in the guidance. It's 10 days out. This would basically match what you would expect with this stratospheric warming event that's taking place. And then here is the influence after that. And ladies and gentlemen, if you get this, then business is open for winter storms. And again, this all lines up to what we've been talking about with the winter forecast and why I said, hey, if you're looking for winter storms, late December, January, February. And that is essentially what we're seeing strong support for. And just to kind of push things off one more time, again, a lot of positive influence here. The Atlantic comes into support at 10 days out. It's not a perfect pattern. With the influence of the negative PDO, you still get this ridge here around the Caribbean. So what you need is for this upper level low to really dig in. It really isn't. And so that's why you get this kind of pattern set up. It's close, but not perfect. And then I know a lot of people pointed out 10 to 15 days out, hey, this could be a stormy pattern. Not exactly. When you're taking a look at this, yes, the heights are above normal, but look at how the heights are forming here. This isn't a strong ridge over Greenland. This is a pattern where you have a lot of storm potential, but you don't really have a lot of polar air to really work with. The Arctic air is not able to dive south here. It's pretty much locked over Canada. So, yes, there's storm potential, but I wouldn't go beyond that point. And clearly, the European guidance, ensemble guidance, and also you could take a look at the GFS ensemble guidance this far out. I wouldn't go into details, but clearly there's some sort of storm potential here on the East Coast for early December. But the question is, do we have the polar air mass to really work with? Seems marginal to me. So I'm not really all that excited, despite what I'm seeing on social media. I don't really see this as a hallmark winter storm event, unless things really align. If anything, I would look more towards the mountains of New England, the Poconos, Catskills, locations like that, maybe as a game, as something to watch out for. And even with that, with these type of air masses, these are going to be high snow ratio type events. 8 to 1, 10 to 1 type snowfall, very wet type setup here, if we get everything aligned. And as you can see, this is the 850 millibar temperature forecast during that time period. And notice all of the above normal temperatures. Now, don't worry, above normal is still cold in northern Canada, okay? But what this tells us is the whole evolution of the polar vortex disruption initially for December is more likely to introduce more Pacific modified air masses until we get that flip and that cold total destruction, which is starting to show up in the guidance that we see here. Okay, and again, this is your wind reversal, and what we're starting to see, if we go back to the past couple of days, we didn't have much support for that. You only had one model suggesting that wind reversal. And as we've gone over the past couple of days, we've seen more and more support for that wind reversal. And certainly a pretty strong support for weakening. So a lot of interesting things moving together. A lot of data to certainly study. Now, with all that, going over all that, my final thing to say before I start answering questions is I'm a very happy camper with what I'm seeing. Everything I'm seeing in terms of the observations and forcing mechanisms and everything lines into exactly what I thought was going to play out with this winter forecast. And I'm very happy to say after about 3-4 years of dealing with La Nina, this is where we'd want to be in this forecast. So certainly a lot of good signs, but be patient. Again, the idea of a white Christmas here, 10%. I ain't moving off that. About 5 to 10% on the coast chance, 10, 15% over the interior. That's on average. I wouldn't go off that average at this time. So we'll keep an eye on the end of December, but no promises here. So we're going to dive into some questions here with the premium chat, and then we will dive into the chat here on YouTube. Let's see here. A lot of good stuff here. Let's see, where should we start? Okay, of course, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I know this is it me, or is this whole year just going fast? Yeah, it's just lightning fast. Before you know it, will be St. Patrick's Day. Oh no, I'm not ready for that. No. Let's slow down. We have enough holidays to deal with. Yep. Let's see. Yes, and definitely be fire safety smart Watch out if you're frying your turkey. For the love of God, please make sure you're doing it
Follow that
right.
sucker out thoroughly.
Yes, before you get a turkey flying into your next door neighbor's window,
Or shed. In the bottom
or
of the
burn a major fire or something. I know Friday is supposed to be dry. Yep, but how about Saturday and Sunday? Totally dry. Saturday's going to be cold, but dry. The whole weekend's going to be dry. It's actually going to be pretty nice. I think the next threat for really precipitation, right now I have it forecasted for Monday, but probably want to keep an eye out for Sunday night as the return of precipitation. For those who are deep frying their turkey, do not deep fry a frozen turkey.
Oh, no.
Please put your fully thawed or fresh turkey into deep fryer slowly. Yes. Good suggestions, Card. Absolutely. So disappointed by the Chiefs. Kelsey was terrible. Here's the thing. I know a lot of you Eagle fans out there. Okay, I know you're very happy. I think this is the best thing that could have happened to the Chiefs because it kind of gives them a wake-up call. You know, the worst thing that happens to a football team after they win the Super Bowl is that they've won the Super Bowl. It's kind of like in Rocky 3 where Mickey was like, you know, the worst thing that happens to a boxer is that they get used to winning. They don't have that drive anymore, that hunger, right? So I'm glad they got embarrassed. I'm glad that they made those mistakes because maybe it'll light a fire under them, and we'll see what happens in the playoffs. You know, Cowboys are not even going to catch the Eagles now. Well, we'll see. You never know. Same here. I think there's some sort of weed pollen in the air. Oh yeah, sneezing. Yeah, sorry about that. The Euro and GFS ensembles are indicating a west base negative NAO 50-50 low and some sort of positive P&A ridge trying to build up the Rockies, setting up going for the first week of December. If we get that pattern to actually set up and lock in, could it provide us with some snowstorm opportunities past December 5th? So I get it. So I get what you guys are pointing out. And yes, there are teleconnections pointing to that way. The problem is, I like the idea of a storm. I just don't like the air masses involved for these storms. To me, what I'm looking at when I'm looking at the evolution and the way that the polar vortex is being disrupted and how the polar and Arctic jet streams are evolving in this pattern for the start of December, the heart of the cold air really looks to be more focused towards Canada, and then it modifies and it gets kicked out. And I'm seeing 850 millibar temperature anomalies above normal in Canada. So I'm not as gung-ho. Yes, there's certainly a storm signal. It just might be a warm storm signal. Okay? So there's a couple of factors going against you here. On the coastal plain, first of all, climatology-wise, the sea surface temperatures are typically too warm unless you get a really strong polar air mass locked in. Don't really have that. So if I'm looking for anything right now, it would be for the higher elevations. I'm not really feeling it for the coast based on what I'm seeing here. When you really dive into the nitty gritty of the data. Yes, the teleconnections are there. I totally get it. Definitely there are signs here. But I don't like where we stand with these polar air masses right now in this pattern. Can that change? Absolutely. That's why you never do details specifically during this time period. But I want to caution against getting too overly excited during that time period. I'm far more interested in the end of December. I think the end of December really introduces more polar and Arctic air masses than the start. Sounds like good driving weather for AC, absolutely. Indian Ocean seems to have warmed quite a bit with Eastern Pacific, South Pacific off of South America is absolutely frigid. And the Atlantic, both north and south, seem to be cooling a bit. Yep, absolutely. The Atlantic doesn't surprise me. You're getting a lot of polar and Arctic air masses moving into the northern Atlantic. You're bound to cool off those sea surface temperatures. The pool of cold air from the surface of 700 millibars has become outright brutally cold over large areas. Absolutely. Let me see if I can pull up that data and then I'll share it here. We'll do 850 millibars temperatures. Let me pull up the data here. Okay, so this is at 850 millibars, and this is our expansive cold pool. Clearly, we have a lot of polar and Arctic air masses to work with. As I was saying, my problem with December is that I think the majority of these Arctic air masses are going to stay around here. That won't be the whole winter, but it will be for much of December. We'll get our cold shots, don't get me wrong. We'll get our cold days and whatnot, and we'll get our brief Arctic blast. But I don't like where we stand with this setup until we get that polar vortex disrupted. And I don't think until we do that, we can really expect this heart of the polar air mass, which is expansive in Canada, definitely. I mean, there's plenty of polar and Arctic air mass up there, right? Building up our snowpack and whatnot. I'm not disputing that. But as we have seen through much of November, and we will likely see for early December, the expansion southward into the United States is going to be limited. That won't last, but I don't see that ending for early December. Will the pattern to the end of December help build up the snowpack over Canada and Siberia so that when the cold air finally comes, it will be sustained? Siberia won't be a problem. I think that Canada shouldn't be an issue either. Even with the above normal temperatures, there's plenty of snowpack, and also with the warmer temperatures, there's going to be a better potential for more snowfall, actually. So I'm not too concerned about the Canadian snowpack at this point, even with this evolving weather pattern. And Siberia is locked in, so I'm not too worried about that. When we do start getting those polar and Arctic air masses pushed south, they're going to be rocking and rolling, and things. That's when I think things are going to get interesting. Again, I really, really like the setup here for January and February. I really do. I think that is where the focus should be. I think December, if you're going to hope for a winter storm in December, it's going to be towards the end of December, which makes some people very happy and other people not so much. I really don't see it for the first 2-3 weeks of December. I don't see the pattern really locking in to what some people want. Let's see what we got on YouTube here. Let's see. I really enjoy your videos. Thank you. Doubt any torch in December. Negative NAO, negative PNA will mean about average temperatures. Yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea of this torch idea. I understand it though. Let me put it to you this way. Because I understand where some of the some meteorologists out there have been saying, some people very aggressively, hey, torch, it's going to torch. And then they get angry if someone disagrees. I don't know why. I get it because of the MJO. I know what they're looking at. I understand it. I like average better than well above average. I can see like slightly above normal. I don't see this as being like hey, 60s and 70s in December, like what we saw a couple of years ago. But I do like the idea of near to slightly above, more near than anything else. Do you think the Sunday storm could bring major snowfall to New Jersey? I don't see that right now. I don't have any data to support that idea. What I would say is that if you're in the higher elevations, like northwest New Jersey, there could be a support Sunday night into Monday morning for slick roadways. Let's go with that for right now. I have no data, nor am I saying that there will be a major snowfall in the northern mid-Atlantic. What I am saying is that we need to really keep an eye on that polar air mass to see if we get more of a rain to a wintry mix to ending a snow type scenario, which on a Monday morning after the Thanksgiving holiday, people driving in, that's where you get your accidents from. And that's, people aren't really paying attention to the news. And then, so just be careful with that. Will we see a torch? I already answered that. The upcoming pattern that models are trying to project for early December with the potential for blocking looks similar to last December, assuming it is true, does it not? Not exactly. There are differences in the way that the mechanisms come together. Location of ridges is a little bit off in the higher latitudes. Stephen, more basin wide El Nino drives low pressure from North Carolina to the Gulf of Maine, so that may be changing a bit. Well, the El Nino itself doesn't do that. There's a lot of factors that come in. Okay, so El Nino is important. For the East Coast, it's not the end all and be all. And it actually doesn't really control our storm tracks to as great of a deal as it does on the Gulf Coast. So El Nino, what it does is it sets up the pattern for the subtropical jet stream being more active. But the storm tracks themselves, as far as whether they head out to the Atlantic or cut up the East Coast, that's more dependent on what's happening with the polar jet stream and high latitude blocking, which is more connected to the disruption of the polar vortex. Now, the reason why I'm a little bit more gung-ho than maybe some for late December, January, and February is that when you have an El Nino and you have a negative QBO, and now you're starting to get data supporting disruption of the polar vortex, this exponentially increases your potential for a sustained negative NAO pattern and a sustained active subtropical jet stream. You combine those two, throw in some cold air, and, well, basically I'm going to need a lot more coffee then. That's essentially how it works out. What's the possibility of it being cold enough come December 2nd? Right now, again, it kind of depends on the interaction of that shortwave. Let's see. Back to the premium chat here. Let's see. If I recall correctly, the really warm 60s to 70s were due to La Nina. Yes, that is true. That's definitely true. That happened during La Nina and not what we're dealing here. My point is that a lot of people are talking about this torch idea, and I'm sitting back and I'm saying, I get relaxation. I get mild. I don't get this epically warm idea. I don't know. The one thing I have noticed is that depending on who you follow and whatnot, there are a lot of people that awfully know goes with the most extreme solution. There are some out there who, for every storm, they compare it to a record-breaking historic storm. No matter what the storm is, they always compare it to something that was historic and happens once in 100 years. And then you have the other side that says basically no winter ever and it's going to be warm forever. Well, if you keep on saying the same thing, you are going to be right eventually. But that's not really a forecast. Okay? I always say stay away from extremes. Extremes are extreme for a reason because they're extreme and rare. Keyword there, rare. So I always like to stay away from extreme discussions or extreme descriptions of patterns, whether that's cold or warm. Beforehand for Thanksgiving, there was all this talk about extreme cold weather for Thanksgiving. Notice I didn't say that. I didn't bring that up. I didn't advertise it. Why? Because when you're looking at model guidance 10 to 15 days out, or even 7 to 10 days out, they tend to have the most extreme solution. Then what you do, you take a look at the ensembles, and then you kind of know it's like, well, definitely chillier, definitely some sort of strong cold front or storm. But but maybe not as extreme as what the operational. And the operational tends to just go full board, right? That's why you kind of have to take a step back and not advertise something like that. You say, okay, look, clearly a colder, stormier pattern for the end of November, but not historically cold. And the reason why is that you want to step away from extremes until you get better data when you're getting under 7 days, because then when you get under 7 days, then you have model data actually seeing the air masses involved and seeing what's interacting with those air masses. And then you start to see model guys, whether it's the GFS, European, whatever, start to produce a more realistic picture of what you're dealing with. So instead, when you're looking at that long-range guidance, what you want to do is pick up the themes, not the descriptors, but the themes of the pattern. And then as a meteorologist, you understand what those factors are involved with, and then you can start adding in some ideas and explaining it to you. But you never want to go with extremes until you have data to support the actual presence of that extreme potential. I hope I answered that as well as I could. Let's see here. What storm tracker should... Okay. Storm tracks for the winter. Well, I went over this in the winter forecast, and basically what we're looking at is a lot of storm tracks from the southeast towards the mid-Atlantic coastal waters. You're seeing a lot of storm tracks coming out of Canada. You're going to have a lot of Miller B and Miller A storms. If you don't know what Miller B and Miller A storms, definitely Google it. Okay, this is your homework. I know it's Thanksgiving, but trust me, it's worth it. Go to AMS, all right, and check out what is a Miller B and Miller A storm. That's essentially going to be our storm tracks for this winter.
They can look it up when they're overfed on the sofa.
Yeah, exactly. After you eat all that turkey and pie and whatnot, Let's see here. It's almost 9 o'clock. Wow, we did really good, and there's some really great questions. I think I'm going to call it a night for now. I think yes, definitely, because it is 9 o'clock, and I'm going to watch the next Godzilla feature on Apple Plus because I heard it sounds really good, so I'm going to check that out. So to close out, I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you ahead of Thanksgiving. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, a wonderful feast with your friends and family. And I'm looking forward to continuing to forecast for you. Of course, I'll have forecasts out tomorrow morning. The rest of the weekend is weekend mode. So that's like the one update in the morning, and then I'm out. Peace. So that's what we can expect. And of course, if there's any changes with the storm setup for Sunday night into Monday, I will, of course, let you know and send out emails and all that good stuff. Thank you again. And as always, stay safe out there.